Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversations. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
Imagine starting college alone with no family to help unpack, no personal touches to make a dorm room feel like home. And Moving Day Mafia, we change that. We ask, what do you want? Because every detail matters in making a student feel valued. Hey now, I'm TJ Mercer, founder of Move-In Day Mafia. And every day we're out here making sure that no HBCU student who is aged out of foster care, or unhoused, or grapple with financial hardship has to face their college journey alone. We turn dorm rooms into homes and provide ongoing support that makes a real difference. But we can't do it without you. Our mission is simple yet profound: to create a welcoming home for every student, a place where they can thrive, not just survive. And it starts with listening to their needs, from their favorite toiletries to the color of their sheets. Your support can light up a student's world, whether it's through a donation or volunteering your time. Every bit of help adds up to massive impact. Join us today. Donate or volunteer and be a part of this incredible mission. Help us keep proving that together we can be a conduit for miracles. Visit our website or follow us on social media at moveindaymafia.org and let us make sure every student knows they are not alone.
Let's be the change we want to see about. We are links in a chain. We are links in a chain. An important wagon on a moving train. In this we're all the same. We're links in
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from. This is another episode of Working It Out Across Generations. I'm one of your co-hosts, Justin.
And I'm Dr. Lynn.
And we have a really cool topic for y'all where we talk all things conflict, big and small, and how they influence how we coexist. So, Dr. Lynn, take us into our topic.
Yeah, our topic today, maybe we should do like a trigger warning, right? Topic today is, can trauma really be overcome? And I say trigger warning because we're obviously going to be talking about trauma. And some of us don't even know the impact that trauma has had on us. Some of us might not even define something that has impacted us as trauma. And in fact, I think a lot of people are saying that people are calling everything trauma, but I think that we've had less of people really being able to define what they've experienced as trauma than more people just naming things that they've gone through as trauma. But in looking up in the dictionary, they didn't even really have, for me, an adequate definition, just in the basic definition, right, of a body wound or some kind of shock produced by a physical. They said physical injury. I added psychological, emotional, right? Injury. Trauma can be, you do not have to have your arm cut off to have trauma. And then the tricky thing about trauma, too, is that you do not have to be the primary person who has experienced the trauma for trauma to affect you. Many of us, our victims, or we are people who have experienced secondary trauma, right? Even hearing about it. One of the things that is really current today that I experience as trauma is all of these videos that are going around that show people getting hurt, killed. I mean, I may not be the person in the video, but watching the video means that I could be experiencing trauma. And I know myself well enough to know that I've had to stop watching the videos. Unfortunately, there are way too many of videos that are up on the internet of people being killed, or we watch a lot of people unfortunately being killed by the police, or just fighting. All of those things are there, and people do not even know that for many people that is trauma. And it's very interesting to me that we are experiencing more conversations about it, that there are people who are saying, yeah, this particular thing was traumatic for me. And it might not fall into somebody else's definition of trauma. But I love that people are defining that what happens to them was traumatic, right? Because if you experience trauma, and here's the other piece, the other reason why I wanted to do the episode, you need to handle that. What I mean is you need to own and honor that it is trauma, which means that it has some kind of effect on you, and then really investigate like what has happened and how it has affected you. A lot of times we may act differently. We may really be different, a different person, same person, but a different person in the way that we're expressing ourselves because of the trauma that we went through. So we're talking about it today because we want people to acknowledge that there's been trauma, that they've experienced some trauma, and we want to have a conversation about even our own stuff. Certainly I have experienced lots of trauma. And well, we haven't got to generational part. So I'll talk about in the generational part, what it was like coming up, right? Just a hint, I didn't hear the word trauma until I learned in college what it was. So that wasn't something I grew up with. But in any case, I think it's a good topic because I know, and I believe everybody has experienced some trauma. You have to, especially these days, even if you don't feel like it's been in your personal life, if you're on the internet, something on there is going to traumatize you. I don't care.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of good points were made. I feel like as far as, the definition of trauma, I think that was a really, really good point. And I think that, people are way more open to the conversation of really being able to define what certain things have happened in their life as, really what they are, right? I think that a lot of people, negate their own experiences. I think a lot of people, kind of second guess really what to label that certain experience in their life that they know has had such a, lasting effect on them. And I think that a lot of that is taught just in our everyday of even just the way that media works, right? Like certain stories will be hot for a certain amount of time, right? So it'll make people think, oh, like, I relate to that, but I can only relate to that until, the expiration date comes up. And that's only a week or two from now. And even then it could be even sooner, right?
Yeah.
So that makes people think, all right, well, my hurt might not be trendy right now. So maybe I need to just keep it moving or not think about it too much or not address it, right? And these are just seeds that are planted, right? With simple things like that. But they are things that they're seeds that we subconsciously water. And I think that, if we start getting into generationally, right, which is where we're going right now, I think, a lot of young people, I mean, you said it with the access to the internet, right? You can literally just load up any site, Twitter, especially X, whatever people call it. And you can literally either see a meme or someone getting their head cut off, right? And it's like, these are things that I'm so glad you talked about secondary trauma, just things that we see about, hear about, right? Maybe things that may not have, personally happened to us, but, someone we love, someone we care about, someone we have an emotional tie to, a connection to, right? All of those things, I believe, when not addressed, can add up, and they can add up to some form of inward inflicting of trauma. So whether that's putting yourself in situations where things could be traumatic, putting yourself around people in which, they are in a state where, it's a little uncertain of what you're going to get, but maybe something that's not great, right? Like all these different things, I think that, when we think about our young people, when we think about what is really being put in their brains all the time, me being one of them, even just from the music that we listen to, which, for a lot of people, yes, that's storytelling, and please share your story. But, we have to consider, I think, the trendiness of it all, and the things of, the trendiness of it all, right? It's, I think these are people's lives at the end of the day. So just because it might get a bunch of clicks, or a story might get a bunch of views, or an article might get, that next level coverage that it needs to really, boost someone's career, I think that, everyone's aware of the comment section. I think everyone's aware of.
Oh, that's trauma right there. Reading the comments when it's about you.
Yeah, that is trauma. But I think everyone's aware of, just like those kinds of forums where people can go to, specifically add to the fire and add fuel to the fire. Wow. And so I think that, for our young people, we really have to be careful of what we're putting out there and what we're allowing them to consume, and when, and the conversations that come up around it, right? I feel like a lot of people in my life, I've had to kind of tell them in a way, like, that was trauma. Like, I can imagine that was traumatizing for you, not tell them, but open them up to that idea that, maybe this was worse than what you think, even though you're handling it better than you thought you would. So again, just being able to name things for what they are, I really think that this is an important conversation, and one that needs to be ongoing, as it's a really important question. Can it really be overcome if we live in a world where, we thrive off trauma, where trauma is marketable, where trauma is honestly, people put themselves through a lot to get themselves to the lengths that they go to. And even when they get there, there's a lot more to deal with, right? So can it really be overcome? I think it's a great question.
Great points that, look, from my generation and as a mother, there are things that I think about, and I think, oh my gosh, this has got to be detrimental to our young people,
sad,
all of these
whatever
things.
Yeah.
But I also know that honestly, every generation says that about somebody else, the generation behind them, or two generations. So I don't always bring that out into the atmosphere. My thoughts about, gosh, how are they dealing with this, or this has, but for you to notice is so important, because media doesn't just do stories all willy-nilly, right? As you said, there's a marketing strategy. They know what works. They clearly know that the negative attracts, it draws people. They clearly know that because that is what we're fed 24/7, right? People, as you said, I love that you said, because we're seeing all these influencers, which is fine. But when I look at some of these shows or some of these videos, I think, wow, the lengths that people are willing to go through, put themselves through just for what, 15 minutes of fame for some shows, right? For some influencers. But how many, like, they may be making millions or really famous, but how long will that last, number one? And number two, how much room is there for everybody, right? Fine. It's not as hard as being maybe an NBA star or something like that, right? Where there's only been so many places for so much talent, and there's plenty of talent out there. But at the same time, to get to the top, you are doing more and more and more, and a lot of it is kind of outrageous stuff. And that has an effect on the people watching as well as on you. So I think we're living in a time of constant trauma that is being often denied. People are denying that they've experienced something that is traumatic, right? I think we're living in a time where people are almost like divorced from their bodies, because our body is going to be your first clue that you've experienced something. You may still be able to get up in the morning, but what's happening inside, right? If you break up the word disease, it's dis-ease. What's happening inside of you, we're not always in touch with that right away. So we could be operating thinking all is well. Oh, that didn't really bother me. But it actually has. I can remember being, I'm going to say that probably around 7 or 8, being at my paternal grandmother's house, and all of my aunts and my dad and my mom were talking about the things that were happening in the neighborhood that were very scary. And we were not even in the same room, but we could hear them, my sister and I. And when we were leaving, when we walked out on the street, my dad was holding my hand, my mom was holding my sister's, and they were both like, oh my God, they're shaking. Like, these girls are shaking. Why are you shaking? We were shaking because what they had said was so scary to us that it created some kind of traumatic reaction in our bodies. Because I have to be honest, I didn't even realize I was shaking until they said that. But I did know that I was scared. I did know that what I was hearing was scary. And I didn't experience a lot of trauma. There were some traumatic incidents, in my opinion, moving from the South Bronx to the North Bronx. Completely different neighborhood, completely different way of life. Nobody who looked like me in the neighborhood, in the schools, teaching me any of that. And you can define it how you want to, but that was trauma in my life because it affected me for the rest of my life, to be honest. And then when I was 17, I was almost killed in a racial incident. And believe me, that was trauma. But the interesting thing was I didn't clock it as that. I never told anybody, and I never did anything about it. And I figured I was okay because I was able to escape the bus that I was on, take somebody else home, make them feel like they were safe, get home to my home feeling like, great, thank God I'm safe, right? Even though these were ongoing things in the neighborhood I was living in. But because I handled it like a champ, right? Then it didn't register to me the traumatic incident that truly was in my life. So I never heard anybody, I guarantee you that had I told any adult, my parents, anybody in my life, they would have never termed it as trauma. They would have said, that had to be scary. Glad you're okay. But they would have never followed up. How you doing? And I have to say that as an African American, growing up listening to the stories of my parents and my aunts and my grandparents, like you get exposed to trauma all the time growing up, because those stories are traumatic to listen to long before the videos of today, y'all. We've been telling the stories of current day, right? History as well, but current day things that are happening to Black people living in the United States. So, but again, nobody ever defined it as that. So I just thought, I come from tough people. I knew that. I come from strong people, and anything that happens to me, I can handle on my own. And it's just, a bad day or a tough break or an ugly thing, but that's it. So, like, as you said, as the trend, like if it's you said a week, I say most things get a couple of days trending. And then, as you said, you're on to the next thing. So what's the message that's delivering? I think that was brilliant. The message that you all are getting, and along with the rest of us, but particularly for young people, is, it's over, so it should be over for me. Or I blew my window to talk about it with anybody because nobody's talking about that anymore. And literally, I'm sure people will say to you, "Oh, nobody's talking about that," or "That's old news now. Why are you still what?" Right?
Yeah. Or just getting on people for still feeling something. And that's the thing where, for me, especially with young people, it gets tricky, because it's like, if you haven't addressed it, if you've never been given a safe space to address it, if you've never been shown that as a foundation, right? The way that people will talk about it and they'll go to the next thing, it's like the dismissal of it is so second nature. Yeah. It's so like saying hello at that point, because that's literally what you've been exposed to when it comes to anything, traumatic that's happened to you, right? I think a lot of people, especially in families, will try to, kind of like, not like talk down upon someone who goes through a lot of stuff, but like, at times it'll get like, like, why is this person still feeling this, or why is this person still going through that? I would know I'm definitely that person in the family who's gone through a lot of stuff, but where at times it's like, all right, come on, like, life's got to give you a break. It's not even like I'm annoyed with you. People are like, life's got to give you a break, and it comes out that way. But I think that language and verbiage is so important, right? Diction in these conversations. And I think, even just saying bad day or we'll get at it tomorrow, right? All of these different things is nothing but fueling the fire for you to sit in longer what you're going through and what you're feeling. And so my thing is, it's got to get out. However, it's got to get out, of course, in a healthy way is the main option and the main objective here, but it's got to get out before it turns inward or before it turns into violence for other people. But the reality is, I think that a lot of people aren't dealing with it. I feel like a lot of people aren't even just calling some of the things that they've been through trauma. Yeah. So let's get into some indicators that you are not dealing with your trauma. So the first one we have, you're thinking about it all the time. Now, it's not that certain things don't stay with you, right? The loss of someone, maybe something that's happened to you physically, however, right? Even spiritual trauma is very real. Emotional trauma is very real. I think we need more respect to those kinds of traumas, right? But again, I'm glad the conversation's opening. So, we'll take what we can get and we'll work as we move. But, when you're addressing it, right? When you're really set on moving on from something, or when you're really set on coming to just a different place, when these certain thoughts or these certain reminders come back up, you're not thinking about it all the time, because you're so set on not avoiding it, but you're doing the work that will get you to a place where when it comes up, it doesn't paralyze you as much. And I think that sometimes people would think of this as like, well, even if I think about it later, right, then what do you mean? How do I know I've really overcome it? And that's exactly why we're having this conversation. We want to know if it can even be overcome. But even then, we want people to come to a better place with their trauma.
Yeah.
That's at least base rate what we would love out of the world and out of, people's interpersonal journeys, right? Is to, when these certain thoughts come up, when these certain, demons try to get at you and get at your mind, right? I feel like that's really where they'll attack you first, as your first indicator. You just want to be able to land differently with those thoughts. You don't want to be able to turn inward all the time. You don't want to turn outward all the time. You want to find that nice sweet spot, that nice balance, and that will literally, I think, save your life, as it's helped save mine in certain situations. So,
yeah, I like this one because I feel like people don't understand that there are signals, that there are signs that you've experienced trauma. And one of them is thinking about it all the time, because we do a lot of thinking. There's a lot of negative thoughts that that infiltrate our thinking. It's just society as a whole tends to show the negative more than the positive. And certainly if you're on social media, people tend more to want to tear you down. And it's not just social media, just right in general. They may be a fan for your coming up, but then they're part of the crew that's trying to take you down. So I think we don't always recognize that if we're thinking about something all the time, that it could be a real sign that it was trauma for us, and that we have not recognized it as such. Because as you said, when it comes up later on after you've dealt with it, there's a whole different response. But one of the things that I know about the brain that it does is it shortcuts things for us, because we take in millions of information, right, throughout just a day, right? And the brain cannot keep up with all of that, so it has to categorize. And one of the things that it does is it tries to protect us, so we will point out what we might be traumatized by, or what might have a negative effect on us. And I used to say as a trainer all the time, when we were talking about things that stay with us, I would say all the time, if you go through a day and you get 10 compliments and then one negative remark about you, what are you thinking about for the rest of the day? You're not thinking about the 10 compliments. You're not even thinking about one of those compliments. You're thinking about the negative thing that happened. And that doesn't mean it was trauma. It just, what I'm saying to you is that your brain will cooperate with you thinking about this all the time, because it was something that was negative for you.
For sure. And I think that's something we're all working on, right? Out of 30 comments, 29 good ones and one bad one, or however the numbers go. But it's all about training our brain and taking over control, right? Really being able to, attack these things head on, with the goal that these thoughts land differently, right? So that you can respond rather than react. So I think this is really, really important. Next, displaced anger. This one definitely hits home. I know for sure, when you deal with trauma, and especially when it's something that, maybe it was just you that saw, or you that maybe wants to talk about it, right? Anger can be the first thing, or one of the first things that comes out. And I think it comes out of confusion. And I think that confusion comes from, just asking, why did this happen? How did this happen? Why me? All of these certain things, right? And I think that when we get wrapped up in those questions without really looking for some sort of answer that could propel how we handle ourselves and our reactions to these thoughts, to these reminders, to these triggers, then it comes out as anger. It comes out on other people as anger. It comes out as if you're kind of like being aggressive, almost because it's like, well, they don't understand. I don't understand. So how could they understand? And everyone feels confused, or you feel like the world doesn't look at you, as a human being, or the same way, or someone who could be going through stuff. All these different things. I think that when we get wrapped up in those questions, the why, or how, and all these different things, without a safe space, I think that the confusion will really drive people to, a real place of heightened emotions. And I think that sadness could be one of those things that comes up, but anger is definitely something that comes up, especially with grief. Especially, I know we've talked about grief here before, right? Losing a loved one, losing a pet, however it is, right? There's certain ways to go about, I guess, some of those questions, right? Even though there's always a space for that and a time for that, as we are in shock in some of these moments. But we don't want to live there, because if we live there, then we're going to start, just not reading further situations, good, bad, and ugly, for really what they are. We're going to have a much more distrust and heightened guard up, honestly, for anything that comes our way after that. So I think it's important that, we don't live in that shock, right? And that's a tough thing to say, a tough thing to do, right? But that's definitely the mission, because that's the way that we move, right? We get out of shock by warming up and moving. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, when I see displaced anger, I think about, you have a right to be angry. Anger is a good emotion to let you know that there are some things that have been unattended to underneath the anger, because a lot of times before we get angry, we feel other things, and some of those we don't feel safe to express. So then anger, people will pinpoint that. They'll say, oh, you look angry, or you seem angry, right? So that's an easy one to pin on, right? To say, yeah, I'm angry, but maybe you're hurt, maybe you feel embarrassed, abandoned. I mean, there's so many ones, disgraced, I don't know, humiliated. Like, those are the ones that people don't just give up easily, right? They don't just sit down and go, yeah, oh, so what's wrong, Justin? Oh, I'm humiliated. Like, most people do not say that, right? I'm not saying that there aren't people who will be willing to say it, but for the most part, that's not what you say. So anger is cool, but it should alert you to something underneath. But when I think about displaced anger, I think about a really great example from growing up. One of really close friends, when she was a teenager, lost her dad, who, what a tremendous man that he was. And there had been a girl hanging out in our group, because we had a choir and we had a girls teenage group or whatever. But we deemed her as angry, and we didn't like her. She always had something sharp to say to somebody and was impatient or whatever. And when my girlfriend lost her dad, she called us all together and she said, I understand why she acts like this, because she had lost her father before our friend had lost her father, and our friend was engaged in therapy, but nothing was really happening with this other girl, and she was just trying to deal with her father's death, right? But still having to live a life. And there was a lot that came out on us that was definitely displaced, because it wasn't that we were doing things necessarily. It was that she had a lot of anger and a lot of other feelings. So if you are shooting out at everybody else, coming off on everybody, you might want to think about, wow, is this a sign that this trauma affected me, or there was trauma and it has affected me, and I'm not looking at it, I'm not dealing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, as an indicator that you're not dealing with your trauma, heightened distrust of people and opportunities. Now, I think there's a natural wall, guard, fence, whatever you want to say, however you want to phrase it, that we all keep up for the sake of just natural safety, for the sake of natural investigation of certain, environments that we're stepping into, relationships that we might be stepping into, right? I just think that when you've gone through something, so I guess overall distrustful of like the world, right? I think that a lot of people, live in the world where, for a while or a long time, hopefully, or I would hope, where things aren't traumatizing and things aren't, all terrible, or if things are tough, they're more, I guess, ways of life tough or natural things, right? But we're talking trauma, right? Trauma, I think, is for me, really just the deeper, scarier stuff that can really last longer. And I think,
like you said, not the normal everyday.
Yeah, not your normal everyday, worrying about this or worrying about that. Like really this stuff that can land in people and that we can become hosts to, and things of that nature. And I think that when you've gone through trauma and you haven't started to address it, right, the heightened distrust of people and opportunities can honestly be, things that you miss out on, right? You can miss out on spending time with friends. You can miss out on, that new job opportunity or a promotion or whatever it is, or, just meeting a new person and, trusting and believing that what they say of being a good person or whatever it is. I think that when you're not dealing with your stuff and you haven't looked in the mirror and been able to say, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to, distrust, right? I want more opportunities, right? And you start doing that work, you'll find yourself as open as you once were, if anything more. And I think that, especially young people, it's easy for young people to feel like, one thing's happened to them, big, small, it doesn't matter. One thing that's gone at their distrust, I guess, of the world, not necessarily of the person or the situation. We're very quick to cut people off and treat people like enemies. And
distrustful generation.
Probably. Probably.
And I'm not saying you don't have reason to be. I'm just finding
probably
more and more young people, from teenage till even 30, 31, something like 32, somewhere in there. I hear them say more and more, I don't like people. I don't trust people. Like, I don't hear that a lot in my generation. And trust me, I've had my occasions, reasons not to trust people, but I find that there's more young people who will say that than people who are, I think, 50 and up.
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably, if that's something you're finding. Like, I don't know. Like, whatever you're finding is whatever your brain's finding. So, like, that sounds interesting. But I know grown ass adults who are fully just like, I'm done with people.
Yeah, okay.
I'm good. I'm caring about the people I care about, taking care of who I care of, and, I don't care for anyone else. So, yeah, that can be something y'all can tap in us with. But
yeah,
I think
that's an interesting observation. Yeah.
Yes. But I think that, address it so that you can step into, the life that you want to live. And I think that the life that a lot of us want to live doesn't have to necessarily deal with forgiving or forgetting everything, but finding some sort of sweet spot in both so that we can keep stepping forward, so that we keep moving forward. It's about, even if we take a couple of steps back, making sure we got stuff in place to get some steps forward. Right. So I think that's why, I really emphasize this, and especially for young people, because, we don't want people living, one dimensional. We don't want people feeling one way about everything. You can feel strongly at a certain time, and that's cool. Right. And even if certain things are about you, like really, really just like, that's my values, that's my morals, I stand on it, that's fine. Right. I think that we got to stay as open as possible. We stay as open as possible by looking at our stuff and saying, I want to get to a better place with how this lands in me.
Well, I think you can't get to a better place, though, unless you combat it. Right.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about and there are more than what
so
we're
many
going
ways,
to, right?
yeah. Like
we're just doing, how we work.
Keeping it broad.
How we work in threes, so we're going to give you 3 ways, and these aren't necessarily even top 3 ways. These are just 3 ways that we know folks have chosen to combat their trauma, or face it, or
address it.
Yeah. So physical outlet, being able, and again, not even again. When we talk about this, we don't want this to become the alternative. So now you take a physical outlet and then you take it and you overdo it so that you're not actually releasing anything about the trauma. You are just using it as a way not to actually deal with the trauma. But when you use it as a way to deal with it, it's a great thing to have some kind of physical expression. I hear people, I know you're doing boxing now. I hear people who do boxing, I know in martial arts, and like being able to get that out without having to hurt someone is great. If they're playing a sport, or you don't even have to be playing a sport, doing something physical. I actually want to learn to really bowl. We used to go bowling when I was growing up, and I didn't really learn, but I really enjoyed it.
What?
Yeah, I would really like to be a good bowler. I used to watch bowling.
I'm nasty at bowling. Anyone wants any bowling smoke, let me know. You have my LinkedIn.
Anyway, I want. But as an example of a physical outlet that doesn't have to be a sport, I know that they're champion bowlers. I'm not trying to diss them. I'm just saying that a physical outlet, maybe you decide to walk every day or run. I mean, something that generates that energy outward and also just takes your mind off of sitting there and thinking about it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know boxing has definitely saved my sanity, in these times for sure. Getting that out is awesome. And, that consists of a bunch of different things. So, really, really take something into consideration. For sure, walking helps. Like, I know that just getting fresh air, gardening, right? Whatever it is. I think, stepping outside, getting that air on you at least is a great start. Walking, great start. Find out what you like from there. That's good stuff.
Therapy. Yeah, I'm a believer, and believe me,
me too.
I came from,
and I know a lot of you aren't, and that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
I come from a culture and a family that did not believe in it, and so it's interesting. I don't really think that ever resonated with me that therapy was a bad thing. I don't think that ever resonated with me, but I know the message was absolutely very clear that Black folk don't do therapy, right? We have God, or we have Jesus, whatever the saying was. That was definitely real.
I've heard we have each other before. I've heard we have Jesus. Right? That's crazy.
Yeah, but I've heard that. We're a community. I remember my mom saying, you don't need a therapist. You could just talk to a friend. Nothing wrong with talking to a friend, but when you're talking about trauma, you might want to think about talking to someone who is trained and skilled to help you really get to the places that are affecting you, that you need to really talk about and recognize. And even your best friend, unless they're therapists like my best friend, then talking to them is not going to do the same thing, but still talk to them. You got to get it out. You've got to be able to talk to someone. But when you're talking about really handling trauma, my suggestion would be that you get yourself a good therapist, and one who you feel like you could relate to, who could relate to you. That, I think, is an important piece.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just the language behind all of it, right? Like there's a science behind it. People go to school to learn how to, be therapists and learn how to read people and learn how to respond to people and, all of these things. And so I just think for me, especially because I've been in therapy for a while and, I've really an advocate. I've had some great people in my life who, at times therapy was us just coming in and talking. Like it might have been a session on paper, right? But it was really like us talking, or, even them telling me some stuff, like, just to humanitize the situation and the dynamic of what that is, right? I completely understand the message, right? A lot of people, especially young people, say, why would I pay to talk to someone, and all these different things. And I completely, oh my God, that's the main thing that I hear all the time. Why would I pay to talk to someone?
Wow. We stuck on no therapy, y'all.
Absolutely. And I think that some of those people who say that, especially in my life, could benefit very greatly from having their own space. It's not that when we're gaming and as the boys, or it's not that when we're, playing pickup ball, whatever it is, that, we can't take a moment and, hold space for whatever someone's feeling. It's more like, you can count on the world not holding space for what you're feeling. You can count on the world for, moving on and keeping things going and, keeping things very much on the surface. And I think that for me, having that space, learning some of the science behind this stuff, the science behind people, the science behind me, I think was the most important takeaway. I actually have therapy today, which is really interesting. So it's funny that this is coming up, but I'm really an advocate. So just for the space.
I'm so glad you are. Please, young men, we need to go to therapy. I'm talking to everyone, but in particular, just the way that society just socializes us. There's a real need to hide feelings when you're a man, right? A young boy, um, however you define yourself, right? There's this push to not let your feelings out, and we really do need to explore that in therapy.
Yeah, that's why the numbers are so high, unfortunately, and that's why they're growing in within every demographic since at least COVID for sure. Those particular
COVID is trauma. COVID was trauma, y'all. I hope that you defined it as such in your life, because going through that time period was traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. So please get that out. That's a call to action for everyone, but especially for me, I second on our young men, our young boys. Please, find that space for yourselves. It's very important.
And the last, creative expressive outlet. Find something creative. I know some people are like, I'm not creative at all. I can't. And I do that. I'm creative in every area except for art. I can't draw to save my life. So I sound like that when I talk about, people inviting me to these painting sips and whatever. I'm like, I can't draw. But all of us are creative in some way. Believe me, whether it's writing, even if you're not trying to put it out for publishing, but to get it out of your system, something creative. Maybe you learn to sew, crochet. I see a lot of that lately. People with the knitting needles and crochet needles.
Yeah.
Really, something creative. Maybe you do paint. Maybe you can draw. I mean, hey, oh my gosh, Madison Harrison. She taught herself to draw. You should see what a great artist she is right now. I would have never thought to explore that for myself, to teach myself to do it, because I've tried so many times, but you'd be surprised, something you could learn too that's creative.
Yeah. I think for me, music is a big part of my life. So whether I'm either just like freestyling or blasting music, or I'm with friends, and, I have a lot of friends who make music and they're artists and they're around the scene. So even if I'm around, one of my boys who's a photographer, shout out him, I could go to something with him and watch him work, right? And stuff like that. Or I could be in the studio with some of my friends, who make music and really make music or trying to make careers out of it. And, we could just be throwing ideas around and things of that nature. I've always got music playing, right? So that's something that, for sure is something that works for me, but something that's expressive, right? I know we just talked about therapy, but if therapy is not your speed, write it down. Maybe a book comes out of it. Maybe a book or poems or poetry comes out of whatever pain you've been feeling, right? We really don't know what could come out unless we address it, right? And I think that so many beautiful things and honestly bliss sadly can come through going through some of the most traumatic stuff that we've gone through in our lives. And so I think that's how some of this work has come to be.
Yeah.
We've really gone through a lot as a family, especially since 2020 and COVID, and now we have a TV show, right? This is an expressive way in which for us, we literally get to show up and express ourselves, right? And so after we got our asses kicked in the physical outlet department this morning, shout out Gabe. Y'all saw him on the season 1, but Jesus. So at the end of the day, I think that, these outlets are so important. It's just such a way to connect the mind, body, and soul. And that's really the goal here. We want synergy within us. So that way the world will honestly start to match what we're putting out there.
Yeah.
Energies do coexist and they do work together. They do have their own, contractual little agreements and things of that nature of what you put out, what you get, all these different things. And so write it down, blast that song, make a song,
I was gonna say
whatever you want to do.
All the time when I was younger.
Journal, whatever it is to get it out.
Yeah.
Another way to get it out and really express yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, shout out to my roomie Nanette. It wasn't trauma, but we put together a song that helped us with our frustration in college. Yes.
That's awesome. But yeah, I think, as far as our final thoughts, this, great topic. And I think, for me personally, it's a topic that hits home for sure. So, that trigger warning, I think, was kind of for everyone, just as in regards to, just how much trauma lives in everyone. Trauma really is something that, is inevitable. At some point, you're going to have to see something scary, something that's, gone against what you thought this world really was to be, and what we know we can be, right? But again, I can't thank the people that I've met through addressing my stuff. I can't thank the support that I've gotten through addressing my stuff. I can't thank the opportunities and support and the way just that things have been going since, really being able to call things for what they are, when they are what they are, and not waiting until things are trendy, or not, waiting until aftermath of when things aren't, right? Calling it for what it is when you have to, because at the end of the day, we got to live with ourselves before anyone's got to live with us. So, we want to step into the best versions of ourselves. And I think that we do that by going through, some of the toughest things that we could be thrown, so I definitely miss my dad. I definitely miss my brother that I lost since 2020, but so grateful for even just the newfound love that they put into my life in their newfound homes. So it's very interesting what can come out of addressing some of the darkest stuff that can come out. So
yeah, thank you for that. And I think that you got to address it. But here's the thing about addressing it. I really want this message to come through. It should not have happened to you. And the fact that coming through it and addressing it made you stronger does not validate it as an experience that you needed. I hear a lot of people say, I was bullied as a kid and I came through it and it made me stronger, but you shouldn't have been bullied. So I really want that tape.
yeah,
Right? I love that you did your work and it made you strong and you learned all of these things, right? But life has its own lessons without people being mean, brutal, and unkind. Trust me. You don't need that experience to grow and to be the best you can be. So let's not legitimize traumatic experiences because they made us stronger, but because we did the work to get through them.
Yeah. And I think that this moment right here just goes to show how much we negate our own experiences. And yeah, I think there's plenty of things that people could say, I didn't deserve that. Why me? And that's a valid question. It's about being able to not live there.
Yeah.
We don't want to live there. But these are valid questions. These are valid feelings. They're all part of the process. So call these things for what they are. You know what they are. Call them for what they are. If you're not safe enough to do that with someone else in a certain moment, write it down. Punch it out. However you got to do it. But call it for what it is. This happened. Wasn't right. I'm glad I went this route about it, but doesn't mean that you're right. This should have happened. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. All right. We hope that this was a good episode for you, important for you, really thinking about trauma, especially think about that secondary trauma you're experiencing on social media. Very important. Yeah. And vicarious trauma, just hearing about something can cause trauma, right? Remember my experience as a child. Follow us. Well, first of all, watch us on the big screen, E360TV.com, Roku, Amazon, Fire TV, Apple TV, and more to come. Watch us on your big screens. Follow us, like us on our Facebook page, Working It Out TV show. Like us, follow us, follow us. And then check out the replays on our YouTube channel, Working It Out Across Generations. And you can also see the replays on E360. And you watch the episode live on the Facebook page.
Yeah. So I think that was good stuff. Thank you, anyone, for tuning in. As you know, a share, a like, a view, anything for us really is gold. So small is all, it all adds up, and it already has in so many tremendous ways. So thank you so much for anyone who's ever tuned in. Catch us next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. This is Working It Out Across Generations. I'm Justin.
And I'm Dr. Lynn.
We'll see you next week.